Go ahead and kick it. So for those of you that do not know, Carry.net is generous enough to set a pretty cool streaming solution for us. You can go to their YouTube channel, and all of our meetups there, they have been recorded, and it's really nice. Pretty good quality, except for the people actually presenting.
Well, no, we're trying to up our quality now.
Exactly. All right. Everybody ready?
Somebody asks a question.
Spencer, are we going to interrupt you with this, or you're going to be good? I just want to make sure we're not going to interrupt you. All right. Welcome, everybody. You're good? All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm Eric Shocum on Twitter.
I'm Tom Rideout. I'm PFY on Twitter.
And we are the organizers of
Not
the
on Twitter. PFY on IRC. I'm Real Rideout on Twitter.
I'm telling you, just get one handle and stick with it, man. Jeez, don't give me that look. Don't give me that look. We're on the second freaking slide. Don't give me that look.
This is the first.
Okay. Second freaking slide. Okay, so we're the organizers of San Diego
Co-organizers of San Diego Laravel.
Organizers of the San Diego Laravel Meetup. Yeah, you want to talk about the next one?
Sure. Our upcoming meetup. So we've got the SD-PHP meetup. I'm the billboard here for this one. That's going to be downtown at Zito Media. And I'm not sure who's going to be talking about that one. Who's going to be?
Daryl.
Daryl will be talking about centralizing logging with the Elk stack.
Not this Daryl. No, but Daryl.
Well, his name's still Daryl.
Still Daryl.
Yeah. They don't know that.
They're not going to be there because we don't stream those. Just so you know.
Well, no, they might be there because we
So, as a reminder, there is no San Diego Laravel meetup next month. We will be, just the holidays just became a pain to try to schedule, so we're just going to skip. But we have exciting confirmation for January. We'll start off the 2016 Laravel meetups with an interview with Jeffrey Way. Those of you may remember, I think our third meetup, we interviewed Taylor. So it's nice to get Jeffrey on.
Yes.
Basically, all we do.
It'll be good interviewing him again.
All we do is we do a hangout. Everybody's welcome. We have a hot mic. Anybody can ask a question. We usually, if you have an idea for a question beforehand, you want to send it to us. We'll queue up questions and burn through them, and then if you want to just kind of come up with something freestyle, just you'll have that opportunity.
And if you don't know who Jeffrey Way is the sort of guru of the Laravel framework. He runs laracast.com, which is sort of the place to learn how to program with Laravel. Excellent resource, amazing resource.
Yep.
If you have any ideas for things you want to hear about, outside of January, we've got a Trello board. You can go ahead and hop on here. You can upvote things. You can create your own topics and say, I want to hear about this, or I want to present about this. Presenters is something we're always looking for. You don't have to be an expert, because nobody's an expert. It's not a real thing, in my opinion. You just have to know that you want to present about something. So go ahead and sign up through the Trello board or contact us at our email addresses we've got on the next slide here.
We do not have it on the next slide.
The best way to get a hold of us is through the SD-PHP channel on the Freenode IRC network. We tweet out
Occasionally, yeah.
once a day through the San Diego Laravel Twitter handle, and of course our meetup and website pages.
And just about all of our resources can be found on the website page. Matter of fact, you notice our little Trello, even trello.sdlug.com as well.
And I've made sure that the slides that we're presenting today and the video that we're recording right now are already posted on the meetup pages, or on the website for SD-PHP and for sdlug.com. So if you're interested in reviewing the stuff that we've got today, it's going to be there as soon as we're done here.
So real quick, since we're at the end of 2015, just want to do a quick recap. I like doing recaps. I'm kind of a recap guy. So we first started our first Laravel meetup in April 1st actually. We've had, this will be our 8th meeting. Many of us have gone to the Laravel conference this year, which was fun, and we're up to 108 members, so we're proud.
108 artisans.
Artisans. Yes, 108 artisans.
So news.
News.
Do you know
right.
UJS?
Right. So we kind of started this last month, and we're just kind of carrying through it. Opportunity to talk about some news. One of the things that was announced is Vue.js. Anybody who's on Laracast knows that Vue is kind of the JavaScript framework that Taylor and Jeffrey Way have started to embrace. Vue.js finally got to their 1.0 release. I've been playing with it a little bit, not being a front-end guy, not being a JavaScript guy. I'm finding it pretty easy to kind of get my head around some of the concepts, which is nice because I've always struggled with a lot of Javascript frameworks. Vue's making it pretty easy.
We've also got new features being announced for Laravel 5.2. 5.2 is on a schedule for December release of this year, so it's going to come out during our down period. But many of the big changes have been announced, and we'll be discussing those immediately after this slideshow.
Right. And actually, one of the things we didn't talk about, we should have been on PHP 7 for this meeting, but actually that has also been delayed. A lot of people in the PHP community are obviously excited about PHP 7 being released. There's huge performance increases, so be interested to see when that actually goes live. That'll be interesting. We talked a little bit last month about how Taylor released some quick start guides. He had also released another one, I guess, in that time called Intermediate Task Lists. I guess it's kind of a more advanced guide to.
Intermediate.
Yeah, but I think the first one was like a beginner or something.
This one's intermediate.
Oh. Anyways, there's another guide out there. I talked about the last one.
Jeffrey Way is now doing what he's calling Laracast snippets. We've got a URL for that in the resources here, but that is it's like a 5-minute recording of Jeffrey Way's thoughts about programming and developer life in general. He's only on the 2nd episode. It's a fantastic listen, just to sort of reassess your position according to his position with where he's at in development and where you're at in development, because he says the same things we keep saying, which is no one knows what they're doing, we're all very confused, and it's fun to keep learning.
These are a list of the resources. These are on the website as well. If you're interested, you don't have to copy them down. But a couple of Laravel podcasts going out there strong right now. The Laravel podcast is obviously the first. That's the one Taylor's a part of. Laravel News podcast, and then as Thomas just mentioned, Laracast snippets. Some blogs out there. Again, all this is on the website if you're interested.
Huge thank you to our sponsor, Carry.net. They're the ones who are hosting us here, have been hosting us from very beginning, and providing the pizza, doing the video feeds, and just doing an amazing amount of more work than I'm putting into it.
Yes, I can tell you that.
So, huge thank you, and Diego Dev's yours.
Yes, and Diego Dev, of course, is our other sponsors. They help with the website. I work for them. I work with them. I own the company. I'm one of the owners. Quite a few of us work there. So we're real happy with what we're doing there. Development firm. If you need any development work done, feel free to reach out to us.
Hashtag humble brag.
All right.
So we're going to step straight into 5.2, what's been announced, and what's probably going to be in the package as well. 5.2 is going to be one of the first major.
I'm going to get out your way. You need me here?
No.
I'm going to move.
You should do it right in front of the projector. Make sure you blot the projector out completely. You know what I have access to. You can't do harm. So, we're going to be talking about Laravel 5.2. Right now we're on 5.1.11. We're going to be going into 5.2 in December, at least projected. We're going to start into just sort of all the things that are going to be new and great and awesome in 5.2. So, the first thing is implicit model binding. This is taking the sort of eager loading of objects one step further. So here, when we've got our typing on our arguments, normally in PHP, that's just adhering us to that type of object being passed in. Well, now the routes are going to try and find that object for you. So if I say in my method that I want the post model for this post ID, then it's going to do a find or fail on that ID in the route call. That way, when I actually get to my controller and I'm trying to execute something, I execute posts directly. I don't have to find the post first and then execute what I want to upon it. I just immediately have it available, even though in the URL all it says is 1. This is a find or fail, which means that if it fails, it's going to throw the model not found exception, easily catchable. It's the normal exception you're going to get if you're using this functionality correctly. But it's important to note that this is going to be using the find or fail method, which means you can't use slugs or non-primary keys for this index. If you have blog/posts/this blog, then that's not going to help you at all. You're going to still have to, yeah?
Is that going to work on all posts, or are you supposed to pass an ID in?
You're supposed to pass the ID in. I didn't pass the ID in the route there, but
Didn't they explain as well the closure where you actually do the resolution closure that's off the route?
the example that Laravel News used, which was the example that Taylor gave, which was a closure version of a route. This is a named route with a use, which should still function the same way as a closure, where it calls the method, the named method, and tries to use reflection to resolve the post. So if it sees a model, it'll try to get the model. If it can't get the model, it'll fail with an exception.
So that sounds stupid, but you typically pass an ID. Is it going to try to resolve every column within that model? Like if maybe
The primary key only.
primary
If you
key only.
yeah, if you type, if you set a type on your controller, it will try to match primary key to the argument passed in, to the first argument passed in.
Seems like a very limited use case for that. I mean, why would you do that exactly?
I write administrator sections for CMSs that extensively use IDs only, and this would cut my workload in very little impact on it, but it would still. Yeah.
All it's doing is it's calling find or fail. You can easily extend find or fail's functionality to another piece.
Yeah, you could extend find or fail so that it did a lookup on a slug column or something else.
In fact, you can even extend that using a trait that may refer to the route as the initial parameters, parallel names, something like that. There's tons of ways you can still
Yeah.
interact with that.
It's a little shortcut with potential. So, but yeah, basically, if you have an argument and you've got a typed argument on your endpoint, then it'll try to find what it is you're actually talking about with find or fail. The next thing here is scheduled task output. If you've ever used scheduled tasks as opposed to artisan commands have this info, which can output information to the console. Scheduled tasks have no such thing. They now do. Append to output with your file destination. So you can just say, when I run this command, when it tries to talk to the console, dump it to this text file instead. Really simple. Validation and collection wildcards. I've grouped these together just to fill up a whole slide, but really they're two separate things. We now support invalidation arrays. So in this case here, you have an array of user information. This being the ID for the user, this being the name for what you're trying to edit. And in our validator, we're just saying that all usernames need to be alpha dash functional. The same is generally true for the collection methods that exist, such as pluck. So if you have a collection and you call pluck, you can now use a wildcard in pluck to pluck from the collection at a depth further than you normally could. If you're gonna fetch values of a relationship of a collection, which is something I run into that you would normally have to do a for each loop on, and then an extra set of queries on your own, now you can do your collection with the relationship and then pluck from the relationship. Does that make sense? It saves a small step, but it does optimize Eloquent quite a bit if you use it correctly. And then miscellaneous stuff. MySQL added the JSON column type, so 5.2 is bringing in support for the JSON column type. That means that the schema builder supports creating JSON columns and all the regular interactions that are completely unnecessary with a JSON column in MySQL. The database driver now uses user ID and IP address, so you can reference user IDs and just flush them all for a specific user ID. So this helps with session management stuff if you're building something that needs session management. Roles and permissions, totally ambiguous thing. Taylor himself tweeted about roles and permissions being something that he wanted to include as a new package as part of Laravel. There is not any official word on whether or not that's going to make it to 5.2, but it's the #1 most requested thing for the 5.2 branch. And then deprecation pruning. So with 5.1, a lot of things that were good ideas initially that turned out not to be good ideas got officially deprecated, which means that they were supported still in the framework, but they were not recommended for use and would be eventually removed from the framework. 5.1.10 and 5.1.11 did not remove deprecated features because if you know SemVer, that's not the job of those versions. But 5.2 will remove all of this functionality, which has been replaced with improved functionality. None of them being really that important unless you developed something with 5.0 strongly in mind. So if you went to 5.0 and said, this is the newest, best thing, I'm going to use all the features that it supports, then you probably implemented things that are going to be removed. Not major things. You can see contracts for middleware have been changed to terminable middleware, or contract should be queued has been changed to should queue. Simple stuff, but it will break backwards compatibility. So that's it for 5.2. Really, not a whole lot at this point.
Is that what the same plug you were talking about earlier?
The what?
Is that plug the same plug you were?
That is a different pluck. That is the Eloquent and Query Builder pluck. The pluck I was referring to was the collection pluck. Don't know the difference. So that's it. I mean, that's still part of the news section, so no applause necessary. So that does take us to John Congdon will be presenting on, yeah, you're up. John will be presenting on, or does anyone have any questions about that?
Please say yes.
Also, real quick, before we get into John's presentation, for anybody new here, just facilities real fast if you need to go. We'll take a break after John's presentation, which shouldn't be long, but restrooms are out the hall to your right.
Yeah. Also, there's enough people here where if you say I need to go to the bathroom, we'll just stop and wait. If you want us to. If they want us to.
Well, now we have to because you said that.
Yeah.
Dick.
Well, they have to because I already do that. I did that.
Take note of this for the next meetup. I'll get TVs in the bathroom live stream.
Awesome.
See? This is gonna be a sports bar soon. All right, so John.
Spencer left, so are we waiting? I felt like he left. that is a cute kid.
That's a huge kid.
No, that's a cute kid. He's not huge. He's
It's like
tiny.
3 to 4 feet tall.
There's lots more where that came from. I don't know where that came from, but it came from somewhere.
Is a link to your Facebook on the slides?
Probably. Let's see how this works out. So far, not so good. I'm getting there. Chill. Eventually. This doesn't seem to be working very well. I'll just do it this way because there's so few slides. We're good to go. So this was supposed to be, and still is, a lightning talk because there's supposed to be 2 presentations, and then I was going to just kind of fill in. Yeah. Messing with me is the best thing to do. Wrapping your legacy app in a warm Laravel blanket. Title credits go to Shokum in just 4 slides. Why would you want to do this? Well, legacy apps suck. Everyone knows who I am, right? Hi, I'm John. I'm a PHP guy. I'll talk. I'm an organizer of SDPHP. Everybody here knows about that. If you don't, I'm sorry. Meet with us, not with this group. Is that better? He made me. All right. So, why do you want to wrap your legacy app? Well, I can speak from experience. Upgrades suck. If you've ever had to upgrade an application, the chances of it happening are slim. I've had projects in the past that I've had to do, or I've wanted to upgrade. I tried many, many times, and it never came to fruition. They just stalled out. Most upgrades take, a year, 2 years to get done, and then the cutover process is very difficult. So they just sit there. I've had plenty that have failed. So this is a way to do it kind of incrementally. How? I have lots of slides. 4. So this is the method I came up with. Currently in the middle of developing it. And if I can get out of my slides here, I will show it to you. I did mention this is supposed to be a lightning talk, right? Sweet. 4 divided by 2 is 2. You are correct. Damn! Foiled again. I can show you pictures of my kid. Damn it. No, we don't. Not at all. So, I have an amazing app here with just a few routes. And if I come over here to... Boy, I go to Laracast too often, don't I? That comes up first. So, stupid, simple example app. Obviously, it doesn't really matter. But as you click around, you are on different versions or different pages. So I am assuming that you're using the old style of PHP coding where each page is its own PHP file shown as such. I have used it in the, or you could use it if you had a front controller, but it's not as easy to do. I still have an index.php file here. All I did was from the command line, I installed Laravel like you normally would with Composer, and it went into the Laravel folder. I simply copied my public index.php into my public directory, and I just called it laravel.php. Index.php, of course, is just the common way of doing it, and that's where Laravel puts it by default. I just kind of copied it over there. so that my current index page works as I would expect. And then the fun part happens within your configuration, which I thought I'd have more time for setup, but obviously not. I've been trying that for years. It doesn't work. I have an alias set up, Homestead, SSH, fun stuff. So if I were to go to Etsy, Nginx, sites enabled, and cat Laravel blanket. Ah, it's too big. All right, let's do it this way. Laravel blanket. The fun is actually right here in the try files. So, assuming you're using Nginx, this works. If you're using Apache, you just have to change your either .htx access file or your Apache configuration with your rewrite rules. Very similar.
Or symbolic.
Symbolic, like what?
Do a symbolic link to the correct file.
Correct file of what? To what file? But I already have an index file, so it doesn't work. He said remove my index file and then I don't have a home page anymore. Okay, so if the index file was the first file you put into Laravel, it works. If not, don't listen to Thomas. He will break your site. So the fun thing in Nginx, this says try files. This says, does the file exist? If so, serve it up. Apache rewrite rules often do the same thing. A lot of the htaccess files that are out there says rewrite condition bang -d or -f, which means if the file does not exist, move on. So if the file exists, serve it up. So this works for your JavaScript, your images, or any other file that's located locally. This works out great for our legacy apps because the file exists, so it gets served. We then go to, does the file we're trying to find with the directory exist? Serve up the directory. So that seems to work if the directory is there. By default, it then looks for the index page. Actually, this does not work in my example, does it? No. How did this work in our other one?
You moved reference to index so that it's getting
Yeah.
indexed against Laravel.
Yeah, that must be correct. I must have removed this in my testing.
Yeah, because
Actually, but my,
Nginx is looking for index.php by default.
but in my example it works, so now I'm very confused.
You want to prefer Laravel over index.
No, I don't. I really don't. But you are correct. And then it looks for Laravel. Well, in my example it works, so I'm very confused now.
Well, yeah, it would still work, right? If you put like, if you created a hello realm, it would look for index.php question mark hello, which would be there.
It would send you to the index controller though, and it should load index.
Oh, yeah, you're right. It would be kind of fast.
So now I'm sorry, but I'm very confused because I know I've tested this and it seems to have worked. If I go to Laravel blanket, I get this that I've been showing you. I'm on the index.php file. I am on,
That's the file.
Yeah, now
yeah.
you're, so you're on the index.php file, but you can index.php.
But that file exists.
Right, so
Right.
you're hitting index.php, but when you click on contact, you're not hitting contact.php. You're hitting
Ah, you are
Laravel.php.
correct. You are correct. The fallback, going back to here, the fallback is /Laravel. You are perfect. So that's the fallback. If none of these exist, it goes to Laravel.php. So in this example, if I go to the welcome page, I get the lovely Laravel 5 welcome page, which is very simply in Laravel your standard route. So in my app, HTTP routes, I already have that set up. That's not going to work, is it? Oh, it worked. I'll be damned. So, the moral of the story is you can take your legacy app. In my case, I would have started taking the wrapper, whether it be your header, your footer, the pieces that are common to a lot of your pages, moved them into Laravel, and then started moving pieces of my legacy app into Laravel. My Contact Us, my About Us, my homepage, each individual piece, put it into Laravel. I can make sure it works because I know the exact route to hit to make it work. I can then remove the file. So my aboutus.php, let's try that. So if I redid an About Us, assuming I knew what I was doing with Laravel, and I had an About Us page, come back here, and I went About Us, and I'm happy with that. I should just mirror my screen, and that would make this so much easier. If I simply copy this, I'm sure there's a better Laravel way to do this. About us.php, so that I know it continues to work. The better bet would probably be to redirect. So return, redirect, about us. Again, there's probably much better ways to do it. And it's actually about.php, not about us. This is why you practice your stuff before you do it. I get rid of the file, it no longer exists. I come back to my index page. As soon as I go to about, that didn't quite work the way I thought. Does the rest not work that way? What am I missing? What? I have a git.
I think you call redirect wrong.
That's a proper way to call redirect, isn't it? Redirect URL.
No, redirect as an object because it's using. So redirect variable.
How about I just do this? Echo about us.
Perfect.
Nope, no input file specified. That didn't quite work out.
Change it to echo with no input file specified.
What am I missing here? That should match that route.
Redirect, colon,
It's hitting index.php.
URL, redirect, colon, URL.
But why is /welcome not hitting index?
It is.
Okay.
I think you're confusing the fact that we renamed this index to Laravel.
Yeah. /what?
Laravel's index.
What?
Well, that Eloquent file specifier is actually one coming from HTML. So I think there's probably something wrong with the PHP configuration before the request. Probably script file name.
His index file.
Oh, dude, I was trying to run that .php. Nginx.
But
Nginx is doing it.
so,
You need to tell Nginx.
but that can't be correct because /welcome and about us work. So am I missing something in my get here?
I think it's something purely because
So Laravel can't handle that PHP.
I think it has to do with your HPF configuration.
So, moral of the story, get rid of that route. Let's do a new file called about.php. And PHP. And we will echo location about us. How does that work?
You can't echo that, right?
Header.
I mean, it works.
It's been a
technically.
it's been a long day.
Header,
It,
location.
that's what I just did. It worked. Ta-da! All right. So moral of the story: I was wrong about having a route to about.php. Obviously, I haven't done that yet.
No, you can't do that because I've done that before. I've actually done the same thing before. The way I just did it was I had a catch-all looking for star.php at the very end of my routes file, and I would check if a route existed or if there was a route defined that matched when I was passing through, and I would redirect that.
You're not Mike, by the way.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, you know?
Sure.
You had a full slide.
Yeah, it's got another slide.
Questions?
The most important fourth slide.
So one of the things that he kind of blew over, but by doing this approach, something you get straight out of the box are things like migrations. If your legacy app wasn't using database migrations, you can right out the box start using database migrations to manage your database. The scheduler, all these external things that Laravel brings to the table, you
Sorry.
can start to use
My
immediately.
wife just sent that to me.
I'm just trying to help you out, whatever.
Go for it.
Show your kid.
My wife just sent this to me. It's very important. I had to see it. It's my kid sleeping.
Animal's still alive on the day. Yep, still alive. Okay.
No, we're not done yet. Don't talk. No. Questions?
I was going to point out one thing you want to kind of keep in mind when you do this is if you have any forms on your site or anything like that, anything that you post, put, delete requests, etc., and you try to go with this route of redirecting, those are going to fail unless you use the new HTTP status codes 307 and 308 instead of 301 and 302.
Is that because the security token stuff?
It's not that the current redirects that everybody uses 301 and 302. When you do that redirect, the browsers automatically go to a GET request, no matter what the method used to be. And 307 and 308 are the same thing as 301 and 302, but they keep whatever the method was. So they would do a POST request with their redirect.
Yeah. Or just make sure when you're taking a module that you are porting, port the whole thing, make sure it works, and then redirect that section of your site. So when we're doing it, we're doing a full piece or a full module, migrating that, making sure it all works, redirecting basically the GET requests that should be happening before that, so nobody should be hitting those forms. But I did not know about 307, so that's great.
I'll take about a 5-minute bio break if anybody wants to.
That was supposed to be 5 minutes, and it was more
Once
than
again,
that.
if you have an idea to present, you do not have to be an expert in any way whatsoever.
You
Show
can
that.
literally make it up as you go along.
That's what I do.
So,
Don't steal.
Unrelated.
You're right.
No.
I can do it from Bible.
No, I
No.
got mine to take the clicker if you want to use the clicker.
No.
I think we're going to take 5 minutes.
No, don't take 5 minutes. We got way more good stuff this year.
To look at, guys.
We got more stuff, more good stuff. I have not seen these yet, so.
What's your Facebook?
I don't have Facebook. You don't have to sit here. You can go to the bathroom. I'm looking at my pictures.
Hey, look at that.
Have the 155-inch screen at home, so let's make use of it when we can.
Oh, can I have my clicker? Please. Por favor. Does this have a full screen mode?
Yeah, you make your browser full screen.
I think that is.
Your browser is not full screen.
That's full screen. Good. Well, I have to hold the function key down.
No, not that one.
I mean, that's as full screen as it gets. Wonder if I make it my own, make it its own tab. See, it won't. It literally said exit full screen there. You saw that, right?
I saw that.
Presentation mode, maybe?
Yeah, try that. Hey, there you go.
Look at that. A clicker? I don't know if you can go up and down. Oh, yeah, you can.
Showing off all the content.
I'm trying to. I'm seriously trying to get back to the beginning, dude. There. Crap. Sorry. Wait.
Well, at least one person is still gone, right? Yeah, 2. Okay, cool.
What brings you guys out?
I'm trying to get web development. I made a couple applications with Laravel, and I like it a lot. Sometimes I my feet web development.
Cool. What do you guys see? Yeah? More? Yeah? Yeah? Yeah, I like to back again. Do a constant catch up. I'm pretty sure it's a good plan.
At the last logo meetup for going for samples, this was left.
They're all the same characters, really. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, I don't know, he's like the main guy who wanted this presentation. He's the reason I'm doing this presentation.
He took his little bait with him, so he'll get more out.
That's right. And the beginning stuff is just kind of getting everybody caught up on what a collection is. Okay, so yeah, let's begin.
There he is.
Cool. All right. So my name is William. I work here at CarryNet. I've been using Laravel since pretty much the start. Technically, they had just moved to Laravel 2 beta when I started using it. I've been around in the community for a very long time. Always been a pretty big fan of it. I really like messing a lot with the Laravel internals. So it's kind of how I grew to love collections, which is one of my favorite features that isn't really fully documented, which is kind of unfortunate. But I haven't helped with that because I suck at documentation. So let's begin. So basically, to create a collection, first off, what is a collection? A collection is a group, it's a wrapper around an array, really. It's an object for dealing with arrays or any kind of iterable that you may want to work with. So by default here, we just have a range of 12 numbers. And I'm turning that into a collection object to do some fun stuff with. You can use the collect helper or create a collection using the full class name. Once you have a collection, you can start to work with it. You can easily, you can work with it in a more expressive syntax than you would a traditional array. So you can get the first and last element or random elements stuff. You could do some basic things like reversing the items. You can, what is this thing doing? Okay. You can do some basic manipulation of data. So here we do a map over the data and get all the powers of the data that we had before. So you just pass in a basic closure here, and each individual item is this variable, and we can do whatever we want with that variable, and whatever the return value is, it becomes a new collection object here. This does not override the original collection. But be careful, some of the collection methods do overwrite those. Usually I believe it's the transform method, which pretty much does the same thing as map here. It will work on the current collection object instead of the creating a new one. You can also filter some data. So this is the same thing as array filter function. Pass in the closure here, and we're just looking for even items in this case. You can do both of those things at once. So you can chain together as many operations as you want. We do our same power function, and then we get the even items of that. Note that it does continue to return a collection, so that we can chain off of this as many times as we want. The base collection class has a lot of functions on it. This is a screenshot from the Laravel documentation. All of these functions are pretty good. They have documentation on what all of these functions do now, which is great. This didn't used to exist at all. So it's pretty cool if you're looking for a function that does the same thing as what we've seen here, but maybe a slightly different way. It probably exists, and it's probably there. Pretty much all array methods built into PHP have equivalents on the collections. So really we can kind of start to get into what this talk is actually about. It's customizing collection objects. It's taking the collection objects and doing more with them. So here, well, before we were passing in a closure to do the power of a number. Maybe we have to do powers a lot. We don't want to pass in that closure in a million different places. So here we just create a new collection class and we specify our function, and we just do that power once, mapping around the built-in PHP power function, and we can just create our new collection here, and calling this function will return the same thing that we did previously, but it's on a reusable object. So just like we could chain before with the different closures, we can chain together different methods. Every time you do the map here, again, it's returning the same collection class. It's returning math collection in this case. Even and odd, they do the same exact thing. So every single time you would do power and then even, it's creating another math collection class and returning that whole instance.
So you're not modifying the existing collection, you're creating a new collection with modifications applied to.
That is correct. So then maybe you need to start working with converting that data into different formats. You see quite a bit where you need to get maybe a function only accepts an array instead of an iterable. So you have to turn it back into an array to pass it to that function. You just call it toArray. Or you need to export it as JSON and you don't want to deal with JSON encode. You can do that right here as well. What really starts to become more powerful though is you can actually turn existing collection objects into different collections. So here we have a basic items collection of the built-in collection class, and we can turn it into our new collection class. All of the collections support taking the other instances. If you were to pass a math collection into a math collection, well, it wouldn't modify it. It says it sees it's the same object and doesn't kill. But if you pass in a collection into a math collection, it sees they're different and it creates the new instance. So here again, we used our power function and it got back the results. So beyond simple arrays, we can start to work with hashes of data. We create our collection, just like before, but pass in associative arrays of data, and we can see how it's formatted, pretty much the same exact way as we passed in. But now you can start to do really cool things with that. The thing I use the most when working with hashes of data and the collection is the list function. I want to get all of the names of all of these people. So here this gives me a collection of everybody's name. This just takes the name property out of every single one of the elements. Again, the same thing, you can get a different object, the title. So we have all of our titles and stuff. What really becomes powerful with the list function, I think, though, is when you pass in 2 arguments. You can get back an associative array. So here I really just care about this property, but I want it indexed by another one. So here I'm getting the names of presenters and the titles that they're getting. So most people, if they've worked with collections in Laravel, they're probably using them as part of what Eloquent returns by default. Here we're just getting back all users, for example. And in this example, I've created 3 users in my database for testing purposes. So I get back their information right away, and I can see that they're of this instance app user and all of their different basic properties. Cool. So lots of different methods on Eloquent where we return you a collection. So all and get do, pretty much anytime you're working with anything that can return multiple results, does a collection back. Any kind of rail output, again with get here, will return a collection. Even something that doesn't have a match, an empty result when you call get, will return back a collection object. Be careful though, because PHP and truthiness, if you're trying to see if users we returned in this example, that is a valid object, which evaluates the true. So you should be calling isEmpty if you need to see if that's empty. Let me step back here. May notice one small difference here. The class here is Illuminate Support Collection. That's the base collection that Laravel provides. When you begin working with Eloquent, though, it will return back to you an extended version, Illuminate Database Eloquent Collection. This collection class just adds a little bit more helpers and methods on the collection object that make it a little bit easier to work with models. Something you will do quite a bit. Some of the most common functions are implemented here. For example, find. Let's say you need to find one specific instance of a user, and you've already gotten all your users that you think you need for this request. So there's no reason to do another database query. You can look up in your existing collection that user ID. It'll give you back the same object.
And that doesn't fire another query.
That does not fire another query. But granted, say this was different. Say this was a rail where you're looking for some kind of property very specifically, right? If you do find here and this particular user did not match that query, it will give you null here. So even if user 5 did exist, if I had a different kind of filter here, that could be a real user ID. It's just not in that collection. So when working with Eloquent, if you have relations, you can, there's a custom load method on the Eloquent collection object. What this will do is it's just like calling with when you're eager loading ahead of time. This is referred to as lazy eager loading. We did all of our queries to get our users, and we realized before we do an iteration or something that we want to get all of their orders too. But if we were to just iterate over that and we didn't do the with ahead of time, then we would be firing, the n+1 effect, a single query for each additional order for each user. But if you do users load here, this will go out and get all of their orders ahead of time and then iterate through all of the user objects and associate them to the right objects. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. Sometimes you want to work with a collection and you really want it to be an array of your models, but you would really like that key to be the model key, which is what getDictionary does. It returns, this is the actual ID of the individual user object that it's indexed by. Pretty useful.
Should be the default behavior.
I would agree, but it adds some performance penalties doing that.
Sorry, you agree with what?
So, thank you. Yes, it was said that it should be the default behavior that the collection is indexed by the model key. I can definitely see that being a desirable thing, especially when you're just working with one type of model. That it could be desirable. Where it's not desirable is you can actually take two different collections and combine them together. So, for example, say you have, for whatever reason, maybe you're working with polymorphic relations or something, and you have two different objects, or maybe in two different tables, but they're of the same type of something. So they'll something that can be emailed, for example, or there's something that can be ordered. They might have conflicting IDs if you were to index them both in the same way. That would be a problem where you'd run into an issue with getDictionary.
So what does getDictionary do if there is a conflict?
It overruns. Yeah. So, kind of going back to relationships here. Relationships, many of them return multiple results at a time. Each of those relations are also returning a collection object. So here we're returning many purchase orders. This will return a collection, the same collection object we've been working with. All of these methods will return collection objects. These can be really fun, and I'll kind of get into that more in a second when we start talking about custom Eloquent collections. But the main reason that it's going to be fun is when you have morph to many objects. Polymorphic relations with custom collections kind of introduce some complexities. I've toyed around with it for a kind of, in theory, playground idea. I've never actually had a real use case where I needed a custom collection object for a polymorphic relation. So I don't know how this goes in production for those. But I do custom collections all the time for your more common relationship types. So, custom Eloquent collections. These are where you start to have a lot of fun. So, here's a snippet from the built-in Eloquent model. Here we have a new collection method, and this just returns Illuminate support database collection in the same, or Illuminate database Eloquent collection. in the same namespace. Now this function, new collection, is called every single time anywhere in the Eloquent system that it needs a collection of something. It doesn't use the global collect helper or anything like that. It calls this function. So what that means is on our model, we can actually override this function here to give us our own example collection class. So here I define a user collection that extends the Eloquent one, and I override it. I say on my user class, so anytime you give me back a collection object, what I really want is a user collection. Obviously it doesn't do anything because this class is empty. But I can see when I get back my users here, I get that user collection class now.
Can you run that one more time?
Yeah. So here I define a custom class, user collection, that extends the built-in Eloquent collection object. Then on my user model, I tell it every single time it needs a new collection to use this new version.
Okay, so new collection is overriding the Eloquent model method collection.
Yes. So I can see here I now get back that user collection object. Yeah. Repository pattern is a great thing. You guys should all use it. Provider separation is a great thing. You should all use it. Quality code in general, try to do it. Not tonight. For brevity's sakes, in this next portion, I wanted to come up with a real use case to show you guys my custom Eloquent collection. This is something I've had to do before. I've kind of taken all the code that it was abstracted out and shoved it into one place that's really bad, and please don't do this in production. So here I have my user collection class, and on it I define a list of variables. So I may want to work with email, name, and ID. These are just properties on my user model. I could just as easily be calling get visible or something like that if I am explicitly declaring all my visible properties. Really, I just wanted to be clear, though, what properties I'm going to be making available here. Then I define this function called getSubstitutions. Now again, this is on the user collection class. What this does is it receives a list of keys, and it builds on that key an example output, that same key from the user's class. So if we remember what the list function does is it takes all of the input arguments. So if we have 3 users in there and we say list email, it's going to give us back all 3 of those users' email addresses, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm building a array whose value is a key with a special syntax, or whose key is a key with a special syntax, and whose value is just those individual parameters I'm looking for. And I return a collection of that. This doesn't make sense right here until we do this. So, has everybody heard of SendGrid? Anybody know what that is? It's an email service. You send hundreds of thousands of emails through, and you don't have to worry about maintaining your mail server or blacklist IP addresses or anything like that. It's a great service. Nobody wants to be a mail admin. Go use it. Here I get my SendGrid class, and I create a SendGrid email object, and I define a function here called email, which receives the subject, text, and HTML. I pass those in. One thing that SendGrid lets you do is through the API, though, you can send emails to 100 people at once in a single transaction. So here I use the chunk method. What the chunk method does is it breaks the collection up into groups or into collections of that size. So say I have 1,000 users that I want to email here. This chunk method is going to break that up into 10 groups of 100 users. Then I say for each of those groups, and of course it's doing fun stuff here on scaling. Sorry guys. So for each of those users, I'm going to set the email address, and I'm going to use that getSubstitutions function. So what that really is doing is it's passing in all of those different variables as a basically a comma separated list is how it turns out in the end to the API, of what those emails or what those variables are. And then I send this email. So in the end, what this ends up doing, when I call it, is it looks like this. I get all my users, and then I say users email, my subject, hello name, on Friday we'll be doing a new product launch, etc. Name is that key that I passed into the function originally. And so what this does is it sends this templated email message to SendGrid along with all the different data. And it lets SendGrid on their side actually put together the 100 emails. And it will refer to the correct variables for each correct user in the correct spot. So I actually had to do this in production. I had to send about 200,000 emails one day. And I was thinking about the scale of this and stuff, and I'm like, I could just put together this quick app, use SendGrid and stuff. I had a function that called SendGrid 2,000 times and sent 200,000 emails. It scales. So here is a real use case where I had a custom collection class where I wanted to iterate with a huge chunk of data at once and use a function that, if I were to do a simple for loop, if I were to interact with this function directly, then I would be sending 200,000 individual emails if I were to just iterate over that. Yeah. So that was my use case that I thought I could show. There's really a lot of them. Does anybody have any questions about this? So, by the way, when I was referring to a repository, this is the correct kind of code to put inside the collection class, not the email function. That's not supposed to go inside that class. Yes?
If you go back to the slide, you say return collect output. Is collect returning a eliminate collection or eliminate Eloquent collection?
It would be returning the base collection class. And the reason that is this data has nothing to do with Eloquent, and it has nothing to do with the user object itself or anything like that. This data is simply an array of arrays.
So if you wanted to return a new user collection,
You would just do return new static is the default way, because static will always resolve to whatever the end class is. So if your user collection then gets extended by another collection, which gets extended by another collection, it will always return that end collection. Yeah. That's it.
well, I did want to say that the reason that I knew that you knew about the collection stuff is because I had a situation where my users had a relationship whose value I wanted to sum up for all users and then divide by the count of the number of relationships for that user. So this is like a 5-star rating system. So if you want to rate a movie 5 stars, you sum all the ratings 1 through 5 and then divide by the number of ratings. And that is a daunting thing to do, but with custom collections, and William helped me figure out how to do it, we could just make a method that did all the work for me, fetching the relationships, doing the math, storing the values, and it, now my user collection, I could just say current rating, and it would give me the current rating for that user, because current rating was a new method that we could add to it.
Yeah, one thing I will really stress is everything you can do with custom collections, you can do without them. There's really nothing special about them. Let me try getting back to an example here. So yeah, I mean, this is an example right here, this power function that we did. I showed you in the beginning how most of us would interact with that. We just pass in a closure and stuff. You can do that all day long and stuff, but when you have to deal with these objects on a regular basis, and you maybe have 5, 10 different places that need to call that, you don't want to be repeating that closure that's all over the place. So doing it as a custom collection really just kind of helps keep your code dry. Another thing, actually I should have made a slide about that, that would have been good. Another thing I like to do is if you've used Eloquent's query scopes, say that you can make common whale queries that you have to do a little bit easier. It's the same thing with collections here. You can actually do additional functions on that, and it's actually really nice. I often do both. When I'm defining a scope, if I have to call a scope often enough that I need to put that on my user class, I'll probably put that on my user collection class too, as a regular whale filter. Just because I may, when I'm calling the scope method, that means I'm initially querying that data. But if I make the same method on the collection, then I know I can always query that. It doesn't have to be the initial query. It could be a result that I then later need to filter. Like if maybe another function, another repository is passing in the collection already returned from the database, and I don't want to query that again, then by having it on the collection class itself, I could constrain it down further without repeating that code again.
That can help us when you're also looking at related collections.
Yes.
So throwing it on and it looks syntactically like it, because that's one of the problems is you're kind of in the wrong, applying filtering into the wrong object.
Right.
You need to change that where clause after you've got your related, if you have users, have, I don't know, have some items or something like that, and then throw the where clause on the end of items because it's already a collection. Really just trying to do a filter and done with.
Yeah. So he was mentioning that you can do additional filters on possibly collections after, or relationships after you've already retrieved them with this. And that actually reminded me of another thing I wanted to touch on. How does this new collection method work with relationships? Which new collection object or method gets called? If you're dealing with both a user and a purchase order, for example, does purchase order new collection get called, or does user new collection get called for the relationship? It calls the relating class. So if you're doing users purchase orders, and that's calling a purchase order model, if it's returning that, it will return a collection called on the purchase order. So say in my purchase order model, I define a new collection that says return purchase order collection. If I do user orders, it will return a purchase order collection then. The reason I was saying that this gets complicated when you're doing polymorphic relationships is because from what I've seen, it will call the new collection method on the first polymorphic class that it encounters. So if your query returns a user first, or it returns a group first, or something like that, it will call the new collection method on that class, even if the rest of your objects aren't of that same type. So when working with polymorphic relationships, be careful. I would try to maybe do more kind of domain style methods though, if I have something that interacts with objects in general and not too specific of collections then. One thing I have seen people try to do is they will end up using reflection inside of this class to determine the calling class and return a conditional collection. And it just starts to get more and more complicated when you do that. You're not quite sure what object might be returned. Another thing I see people do is if you just need to add an extra method to the built-in Eloquent collection, for example, and that's not something specific to a user or a specific type of model. They might just make a generic Eloquent collection of their own, and then make a base model class that does new collection and calls that collection. That way you can still add additional features, and it applies to all of your models from then. Anything that extends that base model. That is all.